Hello and welcome back to the RPG Book Report. I am Logician Tim, your host. Tonight we are continuing to learn more about this Pendragon RPG. Some pretty cool stuff in here. Specifically, we're going to be learning more about injuries and wounds and healing and those types of things. We're going to be answering questions like, what happens when you go unconscious? Do I automatically die when my hit points get to 0 or even negative numbers? How fast do I get hit points back? All those type of things we're going to be covering tonight and more. But before we jump in, I just want to ask that if you like this type of content, go ahead and like the video. You can subscribe to, it's totally free. If you would like to support the channel, you maybe consider buying me a cup of coffee. That link is in the description below, and every little bit does help. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have the book cracked open, still in the 6th chapter called Combat, and we're looking at the injury and health section starting on page 146. Now, the book tells us that a lot of the action in Pendragon revolves around like personal or military combat. It makes sense, right? And if you're getting into fights, odds are that you're going to be getting hurt in the process. Now, they do tell us that knights wear their scars kind of as badges of honor, right? So if you get this big scar on your face, you're probably a big tough guy. And that's kind of the same thing in Pendragon. And it's kind of a good thing too, because you're going to get pretty scarred up in this game. Now, knights can suffer some real serious wounds because of this, and it can take a really long time to heal and rest and recover from all these wounds. And in Pendragon, the mechanics reflect these processes. Now, they tell us that when you first start off in the game, you might just want to use, some of these wounds and healing mechanics and not use all of them, just until you can kind of get a feel for things. Then kind of start adding more pieces of these rules kind of as you go, for a more realistic type feel. And I got to be honest, some of the stuff in here seems really brutal to me, and it seems like it could kind of affect the joy of the game, to me at least. And you'll see what I'm talking about as we go on further. Let's get into it. We've talked about hit points before, but we're just going to do a real quick refresher because it's been a little bit. Now, your health is measured in hit points, and these are calculated by adding your size plus your constitution attributes together, if you remember that during character creation. And on your character sheet, your health is shown as total hit points. And you see this little spot over here on the right, total hit points. Well, when you lose your hit points, your HP, there's a spot kind of on the right side of the character sheet over here, and it's called current hit points. And you will track your HP there and not under the total hit points section under statistics. Okay, so just kind of erase this part here and fill in the new number. And the total hit points is just kind of showing if you were at max health, this is your total hit points. So the current hit points box is the one that you're going to be using whenever you take damage. Okay, it's just a little bit easier to keep track of. Now, you can lose hit points in a bunch of different ways. Some types of damage will cause wounds, while other types of damage will just kind of affect those hit points, right? If your HP gets to 0 or even negative, then death is imminent and probable, although not necessary. Okay. Now, you recover hit points naturally every Sunday at noon game time. All right. So if you get hurt Sunday morning, well, you don't have that long to heal. You'll get a little bit of hit points back on Sunday at noon. If it's afternoon on Sunday and you get hurt, then you're not going to recover hit points until the following Sunday. All right. But it's Sunday at noon game time is where you're going to get your hit points recovered naturally. Now, the amount that you recover is indicated by your healing rate on your character sheet. And this is calculated by adding your strength plus your constitution divided by 10. You're going to take this number and you're going to recover that many HPs per week on Sunday at noon. All right. So this means that once you get beat up pretty good in a fight, it could be that your character will need to rest for several weeks or even months to get healed back up, right? Because you only get just a few hit points per week. And this could really result in your character sitting out on a session or two, or maybe even longer, which it kind of bothers me, right? I mean, I came here to play the game and not watch my friends play. I don't know. It seems like there has to be something that I could do during this time. Maybe play a squire for the time being, or another character, or another knight, or something like that. I don't know. There seems like there's got to be something for me to do instead of just, I'm just watching you guys play. The slow healing rate is just a little bit harsh for me, even though I do understand that it reflects the era of Pendragon. Now, first aid can help you recover some hit points. And it'll make sure that any kind of bleeding or has stopped, or there's no infections that set in, those type of things. And we'll talk more about first aid in just a minute. Your hit points aren't the only thing that you need to keep an eye on whenever you're taking damage. You also need to keep an eye on your unconscious stat as well on your character sheet. Because once your hit points get down to 1/4 of your total hit points, you're going to reach a point where you become unconscious. And once this happens, you're basically just out of the action, right? I mean, you kind of slump down to the ground, or you could even fall off your horse and take falling damage if you're on a mount. But basically, you're going to be out of the action for a little bit. And when you're unconscious, you will be considered unhealthy according to the game. And so you will have to check the box named chirurgery needed. And on your so then that's on your character sheet as well. And we'll be going over chirurgery in just a few minutes. Just know that if you are unconscious, things are going bad and you need to get some help pretty quickly. Now, as you continue to suffer a bunch of minor injuries, or maybe your body's deteriorating because you're bleeding out, or you're aggravating your wounds because you refuse to rest and you want to keep fighting, something like that, your hit points are going to continue to decline, okay? Once your hit points get to 0 or even negative numbers, then you're on the verge of death, right? And so first aid or some type of magic might restore some hit points and help you kind of hold on a little bit longer, enough to kind of start healing back up to positive hit points. But if you don't get to positive hit points to at least 1 hit point by midnight of the current night, then your character is dead. And so you can see how important it is to have like a squire around that has a decent first aid skill, because it probably is going to save your life. And speaking of first aid, let's jump into that now. Now, as I just said, first aid can give you instant hit points. It'll also stop bleeding and curb off any type of infections and those type of things. Now, it's only useful if it is applied immediately or shortly after you get a wound, all right? So after a wound is over 1 day old, first aid is not going to help you anymore, all right? And also, you only get to use first aid once on a wound. You can't just kind of apply first aid over and over again and get those immediate hit points back. It doesn't work that way. You basically get just one shot at it, whether you succeed or fail, because they said that you can't do first aid on the same wound after a failure. So whether you succeed or fail, you're only going to get one shot at it. If you're successful on your first aid roll, then you will add a D3. You're going to roll a D3 and gain that many hit points back to your current hit points. Now, a critical success is going to be 1d3 plus 3 hit points back. So you're going to get a little bit extra. Now, of course, there is a downside to it. If you happen to fumble your first aid roll, you're going to take additional damage, 1d3 additional damage, and the wound is now infected, or it's bleeding more, or you kind of damage the wound more when you're trying to do your first aid, something like that. And the problem is now you're going to be considered unhealthy, and you're going to have to check the chirurgery needed box on your character sheet. So yeah, fumbles are really, really bad on a first aid roll. Good luck to you on those. So now that we know a little bit more about how first aid works, let's take a look at the different types of wounds that your character can get. In Pendragon, there are 3 different types of wounds. You have light wounds, major wounds, and mortal wounds, which that sounds really bad, and it is. Which one you get basically depends on the damage that you take relative to your total hit points. So if you have a high size and constitution, you're going to have a higher total hit points, meaning that you're going to suffer less from these severe wounds. So any hit that you get, any damage that you take from a hit, I should say, that is less than your constitution stat is going to give you a light wound. Okay, so anything less than your constitution stat. And this basically represents getting, kind of like a bruise, or, you got cut a little bit, other minor injuries, those type of things. Later on, though, light wounds can fester or worsen if not dealt with properly, resting well or getting first aid, something like that. Right away, though, light wounds will not have any instant effect on your character's ability to kind of keep fighting or anything like that. It's not going to affect your stats. Taking several light wounds can add up and might bring you below your character's unconscious stat, so keep an eye on that for sure. Any damage that you take equal to or greater than your constitution stat is going to be considered a major wound. And there's a checkbox on your character sheet for it as well. Now, major wounds are obviously more serious than a light wound, and these are injuries that are a lot more severe, like, a really bad concussion or crushed or broken bones, heavy bleeding or like damaged internal organs, something like that, those type of things. And there are 5 consequences to having major wounds. The first thing that you're going to do if you have a major wound is you're going to check the chirurgery needed box on your character sheet. And this basically means that you're going to need some type of an expert attention, like, basically a doctor of the time, to avoid any type of infection or other complications. Secondly, your character will fall unconscious unless you make a successful 1d20 roll against your current hit points. So if you have like 5 hit points left when you took a major wound, you're going to need to roll a 5 or lower to avoid falling unconscious. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to have to roll on the attributes loss table that we talked about before. You can see here, I brought it back up on screen for you. This means that you have a strong possibility of losing a point permanently in one of your attributes. And then you're just going to roll on this table here. It's going to show you which one, if any, that you're going to lose 1 point of stat value on. After this, if you're not unconscious and you wish to continue fighting or moving in some type of way, you have to make a successful valorous check, I guess how you say it, to do so, probably with some type of negative modifier, they tell us. Now, if you fail, you just can't seem to bring yourself to continue on right now, and you'll hesitate to re-enter combat. If you succeed, you can kind of go on, but you remember you're on the verge of death here. You took a major wound. Now, lastly, the 5th consequence is if further actions are taken while you have this major wound, you're going to suffer from both aggravation and deterioration, which basically means you're going to start taking more damage the more stuff that you do, right? Bad stuff. I think we can all agree that major wounds are pretty bad, but they aren't the worst thing that can happen to your character. So if you take damage that from a single hit that is equal to or greater than your total hit points, then you will get a mortal wound. This is bad. You're in really bad shape here. This means like your skull is cracked, an artery is severed, a limb is cut off, something like that. You're in trouble, right? And basically you're totally helpless here, and you might survive if the following actions are taken. And this is a might. So there's 3 basic steps here. First, you have to get a successful first aid within an hour, or else you're dead. And this first aid has to restore enough hit points to get you back to at least 1 hit point. So if you're like, 6 down, -6, you can't be brought back. That's it. You're done. If you do get back to at least 1 hit point, you aren't out of the woods yet. You have to roll 3 times on the attribute loss table and see which one of these are going to take 3 points, or possibly be able to take 3 points away from your some of your attributes here, because you served a mortal wound. If you live past the first hour, happen to live past the first hour, then you're going to have to check that chirurgery needed box on your character sheet, and you are still unconscious. You still might not make it. So all these things are going to have to happen for you to possibly be able to make it through to the next tick on Sunday at noon to regain a little bit of health. So if you get a mortal wound, odds are that you're probably going to die, but not necessarily. You still have a little bit of hope, a little. Earlier, you heard me talk about your character being considered unhealthy, like if you fumble a first aid roll or something like that. And I want to talk a little bit about that unhealthy state real quick. Your character is considered unhealthy for any reason, then this basically means that they're going to need a doctor's care. All right. Any activity that your character tries to do is probably going to worsen your condition. If they are unhealthy, then the chirurgery needed box is also checked. And normally this box is checked by like losing enough hit points to be below your unconscious level will make you check the box. Taking a major wound, taking a mortal wound, of course, fumbling that first aid roll like we talked about, or like if you contract some type of illness or disease due to unhealthy living conditions or being poisoned or something like that. Now, once this box is checked, the chirurgery, or easy for me to say, once this box is checked, the chirurgery needed box, it stays that way until the GM approves it can be unchecked. And normally this is after several weeks of rest underneath the doctor's care. Now, chirurgery's purpose, they tell us, is to halt deterioration, and it has to be made basically by a doctor of the age. And if it is checked, you're going to get 1 chirurgery roll per week if you're under this doctor's care. If you fail, then you're going to suffer deterioration, which basically means that you're not healing that week. You're not going to get that tick from your healing rate. And if you are too active, you can actually cause more damage and aggravate your wounds and take additional, hit points of damage instead of healing that week. So you kind of have to rest, be under the care, get that successful roll, and you should be able to start healing. But don't stay too active. If you do succeed your chirurgery roll, you suffer no deterioration for that week and you kind of heal as normal. Now, a critical success means that you will get double your hit points from healing that week from your natural healing. So that's kind of a good thing. Now, a fumble, on the other hand, means that, yep, you guessed it, you're going to lose some hit points. You're going to lose 1d3 hit points, and you're also going to suffer deterioration at the end of the week. So, like I said before, this box remains checked, and you have to continue to do these rolls every week until you recover at least half of your hit points back. Now, a doctor can only attempt one chirurgery roll per week. That's not one per patient, it's one per week. So it sounds like if two people, are hurt really bad under a doctor's care, and there's only one doctor around, well, only one person gets a check to not suffer from deterioration that week. That's what at least it sounds like to me. Now, in the book, there are other types of damage listed as well for us, things like disease and poisons, fire and heat, suffocation, all those type of things are listed in there and the details given, just in case you run into sort of that thing during your adventures. So be sure to check that out. Okay, that's about it for me tonight. We learned a lot about wounds and injuries and healing, and it really seems like it's very brutal if you get badly injured. Your character could be laid up, resting and healing underneath the doctor's care for weeks or months, and over a session or two, game sessions. Very, very brutal indeed, which reflects the era. I guess I understand that. Some cool stuff though. Now, next time we're going to be going over or looking at the Ambition and Faith chapter. I skimmed through it a little bit, and I'm not sure how much of it I'm going to cover here. One thing that did stand out to me, though, is that there is a section on magic in there, which I'm sure I'll cover that. I always like the magic stuff for whatever reason. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you like this type of content, go ahead and like the video. You can subscribe to it. It's totally free. If you'd like to support the channel, consider buying me a cup of coffee. That link is down in the description as well. Every little bit does help you guys, and I totally appreciate it. I will see you on the next one. We'll be touching on the magic in Pendragon and who knows what else in the Pendragon RPG. We'll see you then. Bye.